So this is a 30-minute slot, correct?
Yes.
I planned accordingly. So, okay. All right. Let's start with our standard prayers. Om Agyantimanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Raita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gauravaktavinda. Hare Krishna, thank you so much for inviting me. As much as Prabhuji has been kind to have described some of my adventures in Krishna consciousness, definitely when it comes to holy name, I'm merely an observer. It's a long journey to go in terms of truly appreciating the value of the holy name. So today, unlike maybe some of our more experienced speakers, I'm going to just share my own journey and hopefully some of the aspects that I am with my struggles. There are some aspects that hopefully you find it inspiring, or at least if you find certain suggestions for me, I think that will be a collaborative discussion that we can have. Couple weeks back here in Portland, periodically we have visiting devotees, and as much as in the neighboring city, which is about more like Bangalore to Melkote distance, in Seattle there are even more guest speakers coming. Whereas in the city that I am living currently, which is Portland in Oregon State, there are fewer devotees coming. However, we have periodically Chaitanya Charan Prabhu visiting, and of course we have Rompad Maharaj visiting and few others. So when Chaitanya Charan Prabhu visited maybe a few weeks back, he was asked a question towards the end. So his main focus of more or less 7-day seminar was around free will versus destiny. So that was kind of the theme of his presentation. And towards the end, of course, in one of the sessions, there was a question raised by one of the devotees who was asking the emphasis on chanting. So when we are introduced to Krishna consciousness, we are made aware that there are 9 limbs of bhakti, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, prayer, Vandanam, everything. So if there are 9 limbs of bhakti, if potentially each of them are as powerful to help the devotee advance, then why is it there is so much emphasis on holy name? For example, we also have some of the other sampradayas like Sri Sampradaya, Madhva Sampradaya, there is even more emphasis on fire sacrifice and deity worship. Similarly, Sri Sampradaya also has some emphasis on deity worship. So if there are other sampradayas having certain emphasis, similarly in our sampradaya, there seems to be emphasis on holy name. So is it contradicting? Mainly the context of the question was, if, for example, we may not find as much taste in chanting, but we might find more excitement in, say, kirtan, or we might be excited by, say, deity worship, or maybe reading scriptures. So depending on one's proclivity, then we may have certain inclinations towards one of the 9 limbs, one or more of the 9 limbs. But nonetheless, all of us are still expected to put in as much effort in gaining appreciation for the holy name. So that when the question was asked, I was also thinking, okay, maybe, can we, if we have some other interest, can we sort of lessen the emphasis on holy name, at least individually? Can everybody make a choice? Ultimately, we are all practicing Krishna consciousness. So does it matter that we have to wholeheartedly emphasize on or make an effort to appreciate and improve our chanting? See, the answer was fairly profound. So he made the point that every sampradaya has an established path. Now, we as Gaudiya practitioners, we have an established path as delineated by the acharyas, that holy name is what is to be emphasized. So because as much as 9 limbs of bhakti are equally powerful, and each of us might have preferences or inclinations towards one or more, nonetheless, because we are taking a established path, we are recommended that we make an effort to appreciate the holy name. So that probably once you hear the answer, it seems to definitely make sense. But when the question was asked, and there was a dilemma that, oh, maybe there is, should we really emphasize holy name? So the answer seemed fairly practical and profound, that yes, because we are following the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, it is imperative that we follow the established path, which has been the emphasis on holy name as the primary means to attain Krishna. Now, I had a practical example earlier today. So we were supposed to visit nearby, more like by the ocean. So it's about a 2 hours drive. And as we were driving towards, it's generally here, as much as it's 2 hours, it's, you go through at a really fast pace. And just about, say, maybe 30 or say 50 kilometers before, we were asked, the road kind of stopped, meaning the traffic was stopped. And it turns out that on the other lane, there was a car that somehow caught fire. Actually, today, it's pretty hot out here, almost like 40 plus degrees Celsius here, which is unusual or not as typical. So the other side, the lane was blocked. So thankfully, nowadays we have GPS. So we waited for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and we said, oh, maybe, let's ask, GPS is suggesting there is probably an alternate route. So we took the route, it was unpaved. So otherwise it was highway. So the GPS suggested somewhat a daring route of unpaved. So we started going by the unpaved route. So we kept going. And I am generally not as particular about filling petrol. So it was fairly towards emptying the tank. Nonetheless, okay, we thought, okay, we'll somehow reach. And then, so the unpaved route kept going to the point that there was nothing but we just had to fall off the cliff. So we had, because it was unpaved, the GPS somehow thought that we could make it or something like that. And I was kind of trying to think about what points to share for the lecture. And that became like, oh, yes, indeed. So as long as you're in the recommended path, you're more likely to reach the destination, provided you follow it sincerely. If you take somewhat an adventurous path of, okay, maybe, there is some other interest, let's try it out, let's probably, lessen the importance of something, then it becomes a risky proposition that eventually what we did was we tried, and then we came back to the main route, went to the nearest gas station, and then came back home. So the point is, established path for us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas is to practice chanting Hare Krishna as much sincerely possible. And therefore, independent of our other interests, we should somehow try to mold our emphasis on the holy name. So here is a brief view of my journey in terms of how things have been sort of ups and downs. I'm sure probably some of you might have had a steady experience with holy name. Whereas for me, it started off with a curiosity. So like Prabhuji mentioned, back in 96 in my second year engineering, there was a senior who was a practicing devotee who came to my class with, wearing tilak, and he was in his youthful excitement. He was just showing all possible evidence that he's somebody different. And definitely that caught my curiosity. And having sort of raised up in a South Indian family, there was always some affiliation and interest in visiting temples. And so visiting temples had this experience of going back in time. So it had its, as you go into a temple that's been built several hundred years before, you feel like a sense of going back in time. So I was always fascinated by that. And added to that, when this devotee my senior approached me in the class, I felt, oh, maybe there is, as much as I had read about, say, Dhruva's story, or even Prahlad Maharaj's story, somebody to in this current age actually doing something that's as close to what might have happened in the past that one has read about, definitely caught my curiosity. So the curiosity changed into excitement, and to the point that I used to tell my parents, your whole human life is going to be wasted. You have to start chanting. In fact, in my family, I was the first one who sort of made sure that the rest of my family members were equally participating in this effort. So curiosity translated or transitioned into excitement. And after maybe a couple of years of excitement that sort of kept me going, then it came to the phase of counting. So the counting is, I don't know if any of you went through this, but it become more like an accountant. So towards the end of the day, you count, or 12 done, 4 to go, carry forward to the next, or 16 plus 4 to go. Then towards the end of the week, it becomes like, oh, okay, you need to write off. So there is a debt of, say, 20 rounds. It's just impossible to catch up. Let's start afresh from a clean slate, and then again start counting. So that was a phase of counting where it was real unbearable beyond the point that it kept accumulating that you had to restart. Then came to a phase of, I would say, infatuation. I just found this word. Basically, that was a period when I probably came to, it was probably when I was working in Bangalore that I had the opportunity of closer interaction with one of our well-known devotee, Krishna and Prabhu. He, after many years of practice, he has truly imbibed the spirit of chanting Hare Krishna as very deeply intimate Krishna conscious effort. But for me, from a distance, and just because of being in his proximity, I too thought, okay, maybe I'm, as much as I could mimic him or imitate him, I was having the similar sense of doing as many rounds per day. In fact, when I was working, I used to have a counter in my finger that I used to type and then do some rounds. Then I realized it became then it fell off because it was again somewhat unsustainable, because you did as much as you did decent 16 rounds. Every additional round became a little bit of, it wasn't easy to sort of sustain it. And then moment you couldn't make it, then you felt maybe you're not doing enough. So the infatuation sort of waned down over the years. Then it came to a phase of multitasking, because as priorities changed, especially with my work, there was additional responsibility. So multitasking, in the sense, chanting became more as a side activity. Somehow I had to incorporate, but the emphasis was on somehow making sure that since I had moved to the US, I had to do justice to the expectations. And I had it on my own that, okay, I've come to a new place, I really need to shine, I need to really work hard. So it became more like a multitasking, that chanting wasn't as much an emphasis. So 3 years back in 2019, I had been to New Vrindavan. That's in West Virginia. That's where some of you might have heard the Palace of Gold that was done by devotees as a dedication for Prabhupada. So there in New Vrindavan, I had the privilege of attending the Holy Name retreat by Sachinandan Swami. And in that retreat, it was a 2-day retreat, which really transformed the way I was looking at the Holy Name. Instead of it being as a burden, instead of it being as a task to be completed, instead of it being something I ought to do because I'm a devotee and what would others think, it really gave me a renewed view of, okay, Holy Name is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really connect with Krishna. It's, as much as people talk about mindfulness and whatnot, it's probably the best method to really go deep and truly nurture and nourish the needs of the soul. So the renewed interest came at the Holy Name retreat. Of course, it maintained for probably a year or so. And then towards the other downside is the guilt of imperfection. Because as much as you get a high when you attend such retreats, when you really think that you can chant so much with concentration, with so much with attention, that you are truly experiencing some degree of bliss of chanting, that once you are unable to achieve it, then you feel like maybe you're not doing it well enough. Then depending on your personality, at least to me, it was kind of eating me up, saying, what's the point? You're not really doing as well as you did. you might as well not do. That sort of doubt sort of creeps in, that you don't put as much effort, that you feel discouraged primarily. So right now I am probably at the phase where I'm realizing I'm grateful for it. See, if not for holy name, what else? As such, we are kind of growing old. So it's imperative that every day is a start of the rest of the life, in a way that people talk about, right? So therefore, every day as an opportunity, as a grateful habit, is what I'm trying, so that it becomes more as a habit formation, which is, you don't really think about it. I'm sure some of you have already made it as a habit, but for me, it hasn't come to the point where I don't even have to think. In the sense, I have some routine that I get up and immediately kind of get to the point of chanting as many rounds as possible, and making it in a way that is less of a chore, less of a duty bound, more of gratitude, more of, and viewing it as an opportunity. Ultimately, what Dhruva had to go through, those 6 months of intense austerity, we are able to practice something similar with our own capability, which is definitely much more in a comfortable scenario as in our homes. So that's where I'm at, and hopefully some aspects of it relates to your own journey that I wanted to share. So quickly, to sort of spend next few minutes on some of the suggestions that I found useful. First and foremost, it's critical that each of us introspect, because it so often happens that until it's maybe a few weeks or a months, that we get into a mode of chanting that is not as effortful, or not as intense, or not as interesting. It comes to a point where somehow you're doing it as it has become mechanical, that you fail to realize that there is opportunity to do better. So it's important, in my opinion, to constantly introspect. Are we really approaching holy name as an opportunity? Are we approaching holy name with that sincerity that, yes, let me at least do my bit in focusing, in giving my utmost attention while chanting, and not really multitask, not really fall asleep, how much ever. So being constantly introspective is, I feel, is a really important attribute each of us need to inculcate. And one of the things that I recently read about is, we have what is called soundtracks that play in our mind, in our subconscious, that dictate how we look at a given day, how we look at ourselves. That we come to a point that it might be unless you truly spend time thinking, you wouldn't even realize what are your soundtracks that are playing in your mind. For example, it will come to the point that you can never ever chant with attention. What is the point? Might as well somehow count and finish your rounds. It might somehow be playing that you don't even realize that it's playing. So one of the ways to switch the soundtrack is firstly checking, is it true? Like, for example, are you really not a good enough devotee? So is it true? So then you can analyze that, okay, maybe I may not be the, it's not about, uh, see, there is also, we talk about humility. I feel sometimes humility can be mistaken as necessarily looking down upon ourselves. It's to look less of ourselves rather than, or less often of ourselves rather than less of ourselves, right? So first thing is to check, is it true? Like, whatever thought process or the soundtrack that's playing, confirm, is it true? Okay, it may be partially true that, yes, I don't have the time to chant Hare Krishna with attention. Then is it helpful? Like, is that thought that your approach that, yes, you cannot spend as much time, is it helpful? Probably not. Or the third question is it kind? Like, you could just beat up yourself. Like, one day, suppose I have additional work at office that I'm not able to do chanting with as much attention. Do I beat myself up? Is that thought, is it really kind? So if you were to really analyze it in this way, then you can come to the conclusion that, okay, for example, as much as we might be self-critical, would you say the same thing to somebody else? If somebody else is struggling and he has a very busy day and somehow he's barely managed to finish rounds, would you go and tell him that, what a nonsense devotee are you? How could you not chant? And how could you prioritize work? I mean, would you ever say that? Hopefully not. So same way, you shouldn't really be self-critical that you end up getting to a state of discouragement. So introspection is first and foremost important. And like I was saying, every day is an opportunity. Think of one of the science fiction movies that I've seen in the past. Is like, the day sort of repeats every single day until that the main person has to sort of cross over multiple obstacles to the point that he makes sure that war doesn't happen. Otherwise, every single day he would die at a different point in time, that he wakes up again and then gets to the point until he saves the world. Similarly, every day when we wake up is indeed an opportunity. We might have not done as good a chanting the previous day or in the previous week, but every single day there is an opportunity, which I'm sure like we all recognize, life is temporary, that maybe one of the days we wouldn't really have it. So looking at every day as an opportunity is something I would suggest. And one of the, I'm not sure to what degree it might be relevant to you, but I had in the past looked at 16 rounds as demarcated by 4 rounds. So every 4 rounds, I would find either a pause, depending on if I had to take a break. And I felt when I used to do 4 rounds and then potentially taken a break, that 4 rounds and the remaining 12 became somewhat challenging to eventually catch up and finish. So instead of marking at 4, I have been more recently trying to mark at 6. So it's kind of 4 over, so it's 6, then 10 and 16. So it's just 3 sort of segments that I'm able to somehow make progress and not really be, oh, it's only 25% done. There is, of course, if the way I'm describing it, you might think that, oh, am I describing it more as a chore? But ultimately, as part of habit formation, as much as we may not have attained the taste, in terms of making sure we approach the chanting without a sense of burden, to approach it in a way that it's pleasant, it's something that we can truly make an effort, is why I make this suggestion. And finally, and some of you might continue to be having work from home opportunity, and therefore the sandwich day schedule is something that has been helping me, which is try to make 6 or 10 rounds in the morning, and towards the evening, since I don't really have to travel, try to freshen up and finish the remaining rounds. So that's something that has been helping. So these are some suggestions I felt that might be helpful. And one of the very interesting exercise that was suggested and that we all had done as part of the Holy Name retreat that I mentioned by Sachinandan Swami is to write a letter to your future self. Maybe some of you are aware, but it's a good practice. For example, today, or maybe if you were to attend some Holy Name retreat, whichever point that you are most excited and you are at your peak in Krishna consciousness, in that phase, write yourself a letter to your future self. Say 3 months down the line, you post. Actually, we had posted. We were like I said, we were in West Virginia, New Vrindavan. We wrote a letter to our future self and posted it so that it came back, and we had to open it only after, say, 3 months. And in that letter, it was about what you really want to convey to your future self. How would your future, what is your expectation of your future self? And by doing this exercise, it gives, when the letter does come, and then when you open it in 3 months, you can match and compare and contrast. Are you really at the position where you thought you needed to be? So here is my the letter. So interestingly, these were the 3 main points that I seem to have written. The first is start living to your commitments, wherein viewing chanting as an opportunity to deepen relationship with Krishna. Chanting need or should not be strenuous, dry, and mechanical. So this is where I was trying to explain how you can try to create habits that make you chant without the sense of stress, without the sense of mechanical duty-bound effort. Then third point is fairly important nowadays. I'm not sure to what degree some of you may have this struggle. I definitely have. Life is full of distractions. It has become exponentially greater in the recent couple of years, especially with so much access to social media, that it's the way these apps are designed, as most of you might know, is they are meant to keep you hooked. The way, as much as these apps are free, what you are paying is your attention. So you might find these apps to be free, but what you're really paying these social media companies like Twitter and whatnot is your attention. And the way they design these apps is to somehow make sure your attention is always on these apps, that you're never sort of getting out of it. And this can really be almost like a sinkhole, wherein assuming you get hooked in. And this is not, I mean, to anybody, these apps have been designed to sort of distract. As long as you are really far away from it, then it may not be an issue. But the point is, life is really truly nowadays full of distractions. So it is somehow I was writing to my future self to spare at least the 2 hours that is needed to enter the sacred space, like Sachinandan Swami Maharaj was explaining the retreat. So this was my first point, and being happy, especially when we come in association of devotees, when we have kirtan. In the past, when I was much younger, Kirtan, especially I remember we used to go to Pune. So Pune Yatra, Loknath Maharaj used to accompany us, and he used to lead Kirtan. As you all know, he leads Kirtan in a really vibrant manner. So we used to dance with almost like it was that youthful exuberance. We almost broke each other's leg. I mean, not really, but in the sense of it was a really wild Kirtan. I had missed dancing in that fervor. So I was telling myself that I need to be happy and truly appreciate. Okay, Kirtan is where we could really feel the sense of joy, cherishing relationships, like beyond a point when even when you're associating with devotees, or even when you're with your own family members, you might find some idiosyncrasies that don't really make you feel comfortable, and you start focusing on that or get detached, but instead trying to cherish relationships and realizing that anxiety is of course part of the nature of this world, but ultimately, especially with the opportunity we have in Krishna consciousness, we can attempt to being happy. And this is the third point which I mentioned about being kind to oneself. Instead of being critical that what a hopeless devotee you are, I was trying to tell my future self, as much as you would tell a devotee friend, I was telling myself that, okay, maybe I'm a nice devotee. Now, I mean, it's not really make yourself proud, but I feel it's an important thing that we all have to accept ourselves to who we are, despite our frailties. At least we are making an attempt. And the very fact that we are here congregating is a testimony that we are serious about Krishna consciousness. So we may not be at the level that is being talked about in the scriptures, but we are definitely there. And as much as Prabhupada has suggested that we should attempt to complete this journey in this life, ultimately, like the best of devotees suggest that we ought to continue this journey independent of whether we really end this in this life or not. So being a nice devotee is something that we have to admit, and not to say that we become proud of it, but at least not to be self-critical. So this is believing in myself, believing in Krishna, and believing in the process. So these were my sort of points that I said to my future self. Hopefully some of these relate to you, and you might also want to try, introspect, write to your future self, say 3 months down the line. If not post it, at least fold it in a paper that you don't see it until say 3 months, and see if 3 months down the line where you are you close to what you had thought you need to be at. Those were my thoughts about holy name. Hopefully it was helpful. If there are any questions or comments, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for taking us through this. It's not your journey, I think so. It's journey of everyone. Each one of us, we all go through these, different phases, I would say. Yeah. Sometimes we are really good when we have good association, and others, we are down. And then, you shared your personal letter to yourself, which is again, something, very important. And I would encourage everyone to, if they get an opportunity to attend Holy Name retreats, they should. Like we had Puri and Prabhu visiting us almost a couple of years back to Bangalore. And he and Sachidanand Swami Maharaj, they organized this Holy Name retreat. And this year also it is there in November. So you can visit the VIHE site, Vrindavan Institute of Higher Education, and there you can look for it. So just want to open floor for any question.
Prabhuji, you are, this is Hare Krishna. Yeah, I am Shanmukh Prabhuji. So I have one question. So you live in the place that is United States. Yeah, it is called Bhogabhumi. So as you said, there is like scripture, I mean, people who get used to the Twitter, WhatsApp and all. That is one thing. Even we are not associated with that, the world, I think the places around what you are staying, maybe I'm wrong, but it is too much materially driven. So, and also, there is a lot of tendency to visit new places, and Especially, I don't know if the whole family is Krishna consciousness family, that is fine. But otherwise, there will be a lot of peer pressure and, the social influence about, doing more and more sense enjoyment activities. So how do you deal with those things? Are you, other than staying in association with devotees, if it is possible, it's fine. But I just wanted to check.
Yeah,
That's one question I have.
Yeah, that is generally the understanding or perception when we talk about the Western countries. It is time and again emphasized in some of the lectures, but fortunately over the recent years, things have definitely changed. Personally, for example, I have, contrary to a city like Bangalore, I would say the city that I live in has more opportunities to be much more attuned to your culture, to sense of devotion. We have a Balaji temple here. There is almost every week there is some festival type event happening. We, in fact, I have just completed my first semester in spoken Sanskrit. In fact, there is a lot of people. Samskrita Bharati, for example, is trying to make sure that there's opportunity for people to learn Sanskrit. In fact, young children. In fact, one devotee couple, their children, two of their children, both just recently graduated, rather 12th standard. Both of them have completed entire education homeschooling, and both of them have gotten into MIT. Now that might be an outlier, an exception, but the point I'm trying to make is, before I made this decision to come to the US, which was largely driven due to career requirements and aspirations, there was definitely a concern shared by my relatives and acquaintances that, are you really sure that the place would be favorable? And thankfully, over the recent years, definitely there is much more opportunities. There is good devotee association. There is visiting devotees. There is no shortage. In fact, that's probably one of the beauty of Krishna consciousness. It is sort of agnostic to the place that you are. Definitely, I would say I do miss the opportunity. For example, Shri Gaur Prabhu knows, a weekend, we just take a car, go to Melkote or even Tirupati or any holy place. I think Bangalore is geographically the best place, in my opinion, where I spent 15 years, where I had covered most of the holy place visits. So that is something I surely miss, which I have been trying to make up through as periodic visits to India at least once a year. But unfortunately, due to COVID, I haven't been able to. Will I be able to continue making it every year? Yes, I'm not sure. But at least I do aspire to come to India to be part of that vibe, part of that the experience of visiting ancient places. That is definitely something cannot be compensated here. But other than that, culturally, there is definitely enough opportunities to feel rooted and not really be carried away by like you said, influences that you can always easily try to avoid.
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhuji. Sorry for asking that question.
Yeah. No, it's a pertinent question. I'm sure if some of you may be in the decision making, trying to see if you were to relocate, I mean, definitely feel free to reach out to me. It's a valid question. Everybody has their preferences, and yes, I think there is enough advantages being here. I mean, and other than the fact that I cannot make it to Melkote in just a 3-hour drive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And I would echo this with my own experience, Prabhuji. Like that we were in Vrindavan, and now here we are in Bangalore. But when it comes to Krishna consciousness, like I don't know, like Vrindavan is Vrindavan undoubtedly. But when you talk about practicing Krishna conscious activities, like we may be doing more here in Bangalore. Yeah.
Yeah, it's somewhat ironic. I mean, we do think being really closest to a holy place would make our lives. I think we fail to acknowledge our holistic view of our own psyche. I mean, unless we are honest about ourselves, just forcing ourselves to be in a holy place itself isn't, and it has to be an intrinsic approach, right? I'm sure at some point in time in our lives, hopefully we get to the point where we truly feel being in the holy place is the best thing, and that's the only thing we want to. But until then, depending on our own proclivities, I think I feel we should be honest to ourselves what really inspires us holistically. Like, we want to wholeheartedly solely practice Krishna consciousness, but at the same time we have, say, career aspirations and whatnot, right? So we have to look at ourselves a bit more holistically and be honest, and until we are honest, I'm sure we might find ourselves disappointing ourselves.
Right. So just want to check if anyone else has any question or comment. I will like to ask one question, like how should we relate studying scriptures and chanting? Like how studying scriptures helps us in our chanting?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been attempting for the last year or more is, as I enter the altar room, and after doing the basic arti, I spend at least a few minutes going through Gauranga Darshan Prabhu's compilation or summary of the Bhagavatam. And one of the experiences I have from that is, firstly, I've tried to make it a habit so that I don't even think, do I read or not? Instead, I just go, I ought to finish whatever 1 or 2 pages. So that has been happening consistently. And what I've been realizing as going through that is, as much as we might have read Bhagavatam once, we have a general sense of the various prominent stories. When you relook at it, there is always certain aspects that strike you and make you that connection that, oh, is this why some devotees behave the way they did? Is this why there is so much emphasis on, say, holy name? So I think of reading scriptures as a catalyst. Like we discussed, how holy name and chanting is the most recommended method of our sampradaya. There are these catalysts that help establish why we do what we do, like how we initially discussed the reason why we chant holy name. Similarly, periodically we need that catalyst of something that inspires us to say, oh, this is why you're doing. Otherwise, unless we remind ourselves of why we do what we do, eventually we'll sort of get down to the trough of the sine wave that I showed. So it's important that we use studying scriptures as a means to motivate ourselves, find ourselves some connection as to why we are practicing Krishna consciousness.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Thank you. Yeah, very important. And sometimes, even the same thing of traveling to holy places, that sort of experience also helps us to improve our chanting, that vibration and that.
Very true, very true. Yeah, as you mentioned holy place, I can think of being in Melkote, especially that there are 3 deities of Ramanujacharya that is considered very special. One is in Melkote, one is in Sri Perumbudur, other is in Sri Rangam, because they are all sort of made out of his own body. I don't recall the specific, but these are the 3 places. So immediately, talking about holy place, talking about Melkote, I'm transported to sitting in that courtyard facing Ramanujacharya's deity. So definitely, these are, as much as we talked about holy name retreat and visiting holy places, these are periodic booster shots of sorts that we need to provide ourselves so that we get that energy and enthusiasm to continue.
Thank you very much. I see a lot of encouraging messages on chat for you, Prabhuji.
Sure.
I hope you have gone through them. There devotees thanking you for such a nice session. We have Sudhir Gopal Prabhu also thanking you, and everyone else. So just want to check if anyone has any other question or comment before we end the session. Good. So thanks all of you. Thank you. Really thank you, Prabhuji, for taking out time. Really appreciate, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Hare Krishna.
His Grace Kishorinath Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Shri
Hare
Jai Shri
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.